Peeperoonies, KP here with another video. Guys, if you're still watching these, you are in fact a real one. Or if somehow this video was recommended to you and you have never seen my videos, hi, I'm KP and I like to yap about my OCs, original characters if you will. And I am this month doing a little bit of yapping about some of the mini OCs that I have up on Artfight. This video is honestly the most me video you're gonna get, basically, as the theme for this batch of characters is in fact Umika, just Umika. But first, if you're lost, Artfight is an art gifting and trading game held all through the month of July, and it is my favorite event of the year, and Umika is one of my most beloved characters. If you guys like OCs, original characters, art, and just people being passionate about their stories and projects, then maybe you should subscribe and watch along. So, some quick mentions. These are characters that are connected to Umika in some way that I have up this year that I plan to talk about either later or I have already talked about. First is my OC Gareth, whom I did talk about in my couples video with his boyfriend Lawrence, and I do plan to talk about Quincy in an upcoming video about heroes. Umika is a primordial. In my world building, these are basically immortal, timeless beings that have always existed, and their existence led to everything else existing. Currently, I have about 6, well, 7 if you want to count Geothermo and Oasis as 2 separate characters, but I am only really going to be talking about Umika and a little bit about Ambrosia and Carbon in this video, just basically in context to Umika. Umika is the primordial of beginnings, history and information, and the moon. Her counterpart and romantic interest is Ambrosia, the primordial of endings, light, and the sun, and together they have Carbon, the primordial of rebirth, creation, and art. Umika loved to observe life on the planet that Oasis exists on, and she loves to observe and intake information. That's just what she does. But this did make Ambrosia quite jealous, and so Ambrosia tries to destroy the planet, which does upset Umika, and she sacrifices her primordial form in order to save the planet, and is now stuck in a rebirth cycle on the planet. Umika has very many lives, and I will typically refer to these as just as Umika or as an Umika life. The first is Sin. This one is an Oasis mix known as a Rakshas. They have 3 eyes and a tail, but she also has this mutation, I put in quotes, because it's actually caused by her being a reincarnation of Umika, but her tail and eyes do not match in color, which for a pure Oasis mix is very uncommon. She has a great connection to the magic force used in soul magic, which is very common for the Srirachas and Rakshas groups of Oasins. And just like all the other Umika lives, she has an ability to sense all things around her, so a hyper sense that basically lets her perceive reality differently than us, which is, yeah, it's in all of her lives, but I more play into it or explore it in a concept in Micah's, but we'll get to her later, obviously. Moving on, we have the Scythe of Pink Lady Apples, Umeko. This one's name is so similar to Umika's primordial name because Scythe actually name their children before they're born, as they get the name from their soul. The soul tells them that her name is Umika, but naming your child after a primordial would be seen as blasphemy in Scythe culture, so Umeko was close enough. As a Scythe of the Pink Lady Apples, she grows apple blossoms that do turn into fruit, but she usually picks the flowers out before then, as having flowers going into fruit, it is a real energy drain, so it's just more of a weird quirk of her being a Scythe. Umeko, out of all of her lives, minus a later character that I will talk about, is the most connected to her identity of being an Umika life. Because of her awareness of what and whom she is, she has never found a romantic partner, and she spends most of her focus on her book. Now we have Ilara. This one is in fact a human and also a princess of the moon, in quotation marks. Her high guardian magic within her body was caught at a very young age, and so she was raised up by the royal family despite not actually being related to the royal family, so they treated her as their own because they thought this would give them a blessing from the gods or something. She later forms this really cute romantic bond with her guard Icarus, and they end up having an affair that leads to her expecting. Then they are allowed to get married. Unfortunately, their happy little life is cut quite short as Ilara is killed by a void monster shortly after having her twins Garth and Izetta. Next isn't necessarily the next life saved, as I have yet to place this one in the timeline, but Thea is a fairy. She is a purple fairy with atypical wings. This different wing color is in fact caused by her being in Umika life. Thea is very new, so as for story, she doesn't have much. I would say that she's an introvert and quite alternative, and amongst her fairy sisters and other fairies, she would stick out and was probably bullied as a child because of these differences. Now we can move on to the main Umika, the OG Micah. Micah's name was changed from Umika to Micah around the time that I started watching Invincible, which had quickly grown into a very special interest of mine, mainly in relation to my OC Micah and Umika, but I digress. Her name is now Micah, and she is an Umika life. Micah is a human with magical powers that allow her to fly and have super strength and a quicker than normal heal factor. Now, the source of these powers is a bit different depending on which AU variant I'm talking about, which I will talk about later in an AU video, specifically for the AU variants of my Artfight characters. But just know, while I do like to copy things over from her main lore over to the AUs, like with all my OCs, it is not one for one, and I do change things to fit into the lore of the show that I am porting them into. They do have separate lore for the canon and the AUs, basically. Micah is the elder child, so she has a little sister named Xena. She's very protective of her little sister. Micah also quite enjoys playing soccer or football, for those that call it that. She struggles with her visions from the past. She also has the hypersensing, but the visions from her past is primarily part of her connection to her past lives and her primordial form. It's so much stronger than a lot of her other lives. So she has access to those, but because she's unaware, she just doesn't know that that's why that's happening. And her husband, True, who at the time that these are happening for the most part is just her boyfriend, tries to help her in the best way that he can with his limited knowledge on what's happening. But at some point, Micah does meet an individual who is quite strange and starts calling her Umika, which does confuse her, and she does look into the name a little bit, which will later turn into her discovering some more about herself. But Micah becomes a member of the Guardian Task, which is because of her powers. A little lore for you guys. My world's version of superheroes is called Guardian Task, only you don't get to pick being a hero usually. Sometimes you can, but you are drafted, essentially, and you're forced to serve time based on how strong or unique and helpful your power may be. Micah's guardian magic is very strong and unique, and because she also has her Umika life set powers, that means she's going to be stuck for doing this for a very long time. And during this service, she ends up picking up the hero name Umika, specifically because she remembers being called Umika by this strange individual and resonating with something that she heard while researching Umika. Speaking of that strange individual, they do meet back up later, and she learns that this character is named Aurelia, and they have a brief spark, which does result in the creation of Micah's first child, Cinder, or Carbon. That's right, folks. Aurelia is in fact Ambrosia. Unlike Umika, or Micah, and Aurelia isn't in a rebirth cycle. She's just projecting into a living form. She's hoping to rekindle with Umika, but is forced to come with terms that Umika is in fact gone, and so this does create some conflict. And if you're wondering, how do these two women have a child together? Magic, obviously, but also with a tree, because it's not like she doesn't actually have Cinder. She cries on a tree, and Cinder comes out of the tree. Little spoiler, she does end up in a throuple with Aurelia and True later, but not yet. So Aurelia is forced to come to terms with the fact that Micah is not Umika, and while technically Micah may be Umika in a literal sense, she's not the Umika in the way Ambrosia wants her to be. So they have a falling out. And also around this time, Micah learns of a villain named Lazarus, who she instantly feels this very strong motherly connection to, and this is because of Umika's motherly nature. It's like a trait that she has. And being as Lazarus, who is also known as Quincy, who I mentioned earlier, was made using cloned parts of both Umika's DNA and her soul, that makes Quincy her child. Quincy was made in a lab, so physically she is older than all of Micah's other kids, so she's older than Cinder, but because of being born in a lab, she's not quite had as much life experience, but I'll talk more about her in a later video. After a couple identity crises later, Micah and Aurelia make up, and then plus True, Micah's husband, they form their cute little throuple, and Micah does have her final kid, Myrtle, with True. Now, again, not much progress on refs from the last video, as I am making them pretty back-to-back. But all of Umika's refs have been done, at least. I wanted to make sure I got those done before Artfight, because she's one of my favorites, and she does, in fact, have over 200 images on Toy House, most of them being by me. So anyways, yeah, you can tell I really like her. So if you do decide to draw any of Umika's lives, or more than one of them in particular, they all share the same character code, so please double up if you draw them, so that you can get the points that you very much deserve. And I did plan on adding True and Ambrosia this year, but at this point, I think it's a little bit late, so maybe next year. If you do decide to draw either one of those, or any of the Umika partners, you can either use Umika's character code or my Toy House character code. Same for Zeta and Carbon and Myrtle, as I haven't added them to Artfight either. I'm going to wrap up the video, as I'm sure you are tired of me rambling about Umika. All Umika outed, if you will. But if you aren't tired of me talking about her, don't worry, she'll come up again in the fandom AUOCs up on Artfight video, if I have time to make it. Because she's in a lot of AUs, so she's going to be pretty prevalent. Okay, if you guys want to support me and get your name at the end of my videos, you can check out my Patreon and Ko-fi memberships. That doesn't only just get your name at the end of my videos and support me, but it also gets you access to free claims, exclusive commission opportunities, and at the higher tiers, you even get art rewards each month. If you can't support me monetarily, it's okay too. Just letting me know that you like the video helps a lot. Like, a lot. You can do that by leaving a comment telling me if you have any OCs that you just adore to death, liking the video, and by subscribing if you aren't already, and turning on notifications to know the next time that I post, which should hopefully be sooner rather than later. And until then, bye-bye!